And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again across the great Louisiana plain, where we are advancing and elevating the cause of constitutional conservatism, elevating the voice of constitutional conservatives, and slowly but surely, day by day, draining the Louisiana swamp. My name is Chris.
And I'm Danielle, and this is the State of Freedom, brought to you by freedom-loving Louisiana First Patriots. Hello, State of Freedom warriors. Thank you for having us along for part of your day, wherever your day might take you. We are so thankful for you. We're thankful for your encouragement, your prayers, your financial support. You are the best listening family we could possibly hope for. And if you are looking for a way to support us, advertise with us, or send us feedback, please visit our website at freedomstate.us. We'd also love it if you'd help us get the word out and spread the reach of the State of Freedom across the state and beyond. Please like the show on whatever platform you listen to us, subscribe to it, and share it. You can share short clips instead of the full episodes over on our YouTube and Rumble channels. The links to those are in the show notes and over on freedomstate.us. And today we will be picking up where we left off of our in-depth interview with Ben Clapper of Louisiana Right to Life. But before we pick up the conversation, let me read the scripture of the day. It's Psalms chapter 31, verses 23 to 24. And it says, "Listen to me, all you godly ones. Love the Lord with passion. The Lord protects and preserves all those who are loyal to him, but he pays back in full all those who reject him in their pride. So cheer up, take courage, all you who love him. Wait for him to break through for you, all you who trust in him." And it's been a regular theme, I know, that has been coming up during these scripture readings on the State of Freedom. Don't grow weary of doing good. Don't grow weary of loving and following and trusting in the Lord. He is faithful. And those who reject him in their heart and with their actions will reap the consequences of that. He will come through for you. He never fails. He never lies. He never leaves us. He will bring the breakthrough that you have been waiting to see. So don't give up. The Lord sees you, and he is faithful, trustworthy, and true. We can count on him.
And don't grow weary of waiting. There's a great, maybe Isaiah, maybe one of the Psalms, where it says, "Wait for the Lord with courage. Be stout-hearted and wait for the Lord." So there are times when we wait, and we have to remain faithful in our prayer, remain faithful in our commitments, even while we are waiting, because the Lord's timing is the timing that is perfect. And sometimes if we get things right when we want them, well, maybe we got them, but guess what? We have not developed to the point where the Lord wants us to be so that we can truly receive them and use the gifts that he's given us or the blessings that he's given us for his glory. There's always a reason why we have to wait. And speaking of waiting, Danielle, we waited 50 years for the reversal of abortion on demand in the United States of America. And the Louisiana Right to Life has been there all the way through, fighting all the way through, never giving up, even during times, I'm sure, of discouragement along the way. I'm so happy to have Ben Clapper back with us for the second part of his two-part series on the State of Freedom, to talk about these issues, to talk about the Dobbs decision and other things. So without further ado, let's get to it. Now, obviously, we believe that, an unborn child conceived as a result of rape or incest, or a situation where the life of the mother may be in danger, the unborn child is no less intrinsically valuable. And so we don't believe that abortion is any more acceptable in that situation than it is in any other, notwithstanding the great compassion and the great sensitivity we feel to women who are faced with that those horrific type situations. But I say that to say this, Ben. Many of the people who argue for abortion, particularly those more on the left, on the radical left, the activists out there, they tend to frame the issue always in terms of the very worst case scenarios. And I think it's important to remember that those horrific type situations are, what is it, less than 1%, Ben? Okay, so 99% of all abortions that have occurred over the past 50 years in the United States have been purely elective abortions, not involving rape, not involving incest, not involving danger to the life of the mother. So my question is this: do the people who advocate publicly for abortion and are very outspoken about it, particularly those more on the hard left, do they believe, even though they're always talking about the difficult cases, do they in reality believe in any limitations on abortion? What is your perception of what their real view is on abortion?
Yeah, well, I would say the pure leadership of the abortion industry do not support any limitations on abortion. That's, I mean, you see that in laws that are passed in California and New York. It's very clear that they are all or nothing, that they want abortion legal at all times. You could even argue that they want it to be illegal even beyond, if an infant is born alive in the process of an abortion, that the doctor would still have the ability to intentionally, whether through omission or through an intentional act, in the life of that child. So now, when it comes to the rank and file people who choose to be pro-choice, the studies show that those people do not support late-term abortion. I think that studies I've shown, and I'm not looking at them right now, so don't quote me on it, but there's something to the fact that only really 13% of America believes that abortion should be legal up until birth and all 9 months of pregnancy. So we're in a tough spot in America because it's bizarre that only a small percentage of Americans believe in that, yet the Democratic Party, that's their position now on what only 13% of Americans agree with. So really, we need to make people aware that the abortion industry and the politicians that represent them, which is predominantly found in the National Democrat Party, are pushing for abortion in all cases. Now, the challenge is that it's true that many Americans do not support or would support abortion in case of rape and incest. You look at any polling data, it's pretty clear that a majority of Americans support that. So what the abortion industry has done really well is they have a lot of money and they go into states and scare pro-life or scare kind of middle of the road Americans and say, if you let the pro-life Republicans do X, Y, and Z, then you're going to have no abortions, even in case of rape and incest, even in cases of when a mother's life is in jeopardy, which is totally bogus. But when you spend $4 million over the course of a week in a state like Ohio and you slam that message into their brain, that's what you get. And we have to remember that the majority of Americans, when it comes to abortion, are in the middle.
Yeah. My dad used to say, Ben, that the rare exception makes very bad law. You don't base general law on the very rare, unfortunate exception.
That's right. Absolutely. And, we're talking about like I said earlier, there's situations where things aren't black and white, but when it comes, rape and incest is different than a medical emergency or a miscarriage or something like that. I mean, by and large, most of these times, these are healthy babies. And, if they're born, they'll go on to live, a good life and have a great chance at a good life. And they deserve protection as well. And people need to see through the radical nature of the other side that wants abortion without apology, and they even want to use taxpayer dollars to fund it. And that's right. I mean, we can Congress. It's funny, we talk about a personhood bill in Congress or something to that effect, but Congress still has not passed a ban on taxpayer funding of abortion. And Senate Democrats and President Biden are unwilling. They don't support that, a ban on taxpayer funding of abortion. So I mean, it's one thing to talk about the things that we need to do in Congress, but it's like we got to take baby steps first and accomplish things that we know the majority of Americans agree with us that we should not allow taxpayer funding of abortion. Unfortunately, the Democratic Party, and there's the filibuster in the Senate, which sometimes is good for us when there's a pro-abortion majority, but when we have a pro-life majority, it makes it hard to pass things like that. So it's a divided government. We have a divided nation on abortion, and if we don't change hearts and minds, then it's gonna be hard for us to move the ball further down the field than where we are today.
Yeah, it's a cultural shift that we need apart from legislation, apart from law. You're so right. It's a shift in the moral way in which we view abortion after 50 years of being anesthetized to it in the United States. Yeah, you're exactly right. Do you think, Ben, more broadly, Mother Teresa used to warn that any society that sanctions the destruction of an unborn human life, that precedent leads to a broader degradation of human life and society and the dignity of the human person. Do you think that part of the reason why we seem to live in such a crass society in which people often show so little respect to one another, so little civility, so little respect for human dignity, do you think that in part has its origin in 50 years of abortion in the United States?
I think that it plays definitely a part of it. I would say that you could even take a step further back and realize that evil and the disregard for human life has existed for all time, right? Ever since there's been sin, there's been evil, and that evil has manifested itself so often as a fundamental disrespect for human life, born or unborn. I mean, goodness, you go back to the killing of children in the Old Testament with when people would sacrifice children to the false god Baal. I mean, it's been happening forever. Probably it's going to continue happening forever. So I think this is the evil of our day. I mean, there are lots of evils as well, but this is an evil of our day. And yes, how comfortable we've become with abortion in America, and I'm saying that as a general statement of Americans. When I'll tell you, just think about this: in the state of Ohio, there's the county called Ruby Red County of Ohio. It's never supported a Democratic candidate for president, never. And that county supported the abortion initiative, ballot initiative there. So you're talking that Americans are comfortable with the taking of innocent human life in the womb. If we're comfortable with that, then we're going to be comfortable with the disrespect for human life in other places and other situations as well. So I know that there's often that analogy that people say, if you drop the frog in boiling water, the frog's going to jump out. And if you put that frog in lukewarm water and slowly boil, he's just going to stay there. It's kind of, sometimes I feel like what we've done with ourselves in America is that we've accepted abortion and we have brought it into the fabric of our culture, not as an act that kills a human being, but as something that takes care of an unfortunate situation for some people. And we've disrespected all of human life and the process. Yeah.
Yeah. To analogize for a moment, you remember the Nuremberg trials, and Robert Jackson, the great U.S. Supreme Court justice, was the chief prosecutor at the Nuremberg trials. And once the evidence was put forward and just the evidence of just the horrific massacre of so many Jews under Adolf Hitler, when that trial was over and those henchmen the Nazi leaders were convicted. Some of them hung themselves before they could be executed. But one of them who had been involved in this, just this monstrosity under Hitler, actually asked Jackson once it was over with, because he was truly, truly just heartbroken that it had gotten to that point. And he said, I never thought that it would ever get to this point. All we were trying to do was to eliminate those who could not contribute to society, those who were defective. And Robert Jackson looked at him and said, "Do you know when it got to this point, General? It got to this point in principle and in precedent the moment you authorized in law the destruction of the first innocent life." And he said, from that point forward, it was simply a matter of time and degree. Uh, and that's such a profound point, because the evil really is in the precedent, and the moment we sanction the destruction of even one innocent life, ultimately this is what it leads to.
That's right. That's right. We take little steps and we become more and more comfortable with evil, and that's a clear example of how it happened then, and it's happening again today. And it almost makes you, when you see the way the society is. First, it makes me think, wow, how did we even how did Roe v. Wade's overturn happen amidst everything that's happened, right? So even you question that, and then you also wonder, how are we going to pull the weed of abortion out of our society? It's going to be hard, but again, we have to keep fighting, and we have to keep educating and keep serving and helping moms, and all of the above, keep legislating and keep winning elections, and have to do all these things, because the unborn child have literally no voice, right? We are their only voice. Other justice issues in history, at least the oppressed have had some ability to express themselves. I know not much, but the unborn child is radically silent, and we have to be their voice.
Yeah. And Ben, on that very topic, how do we take back the ground culturally on this issue? You see how insidious this is. I was thinking back about how the abortion lobby invaded culture and the mindset of people. And even you can look back to the 1980s, right? One of the movies that's considered so iconic from the 80s is Dirty Dancing, where they were starting to really normalize abortion to the culture. And it's only increased from there, I think, in the Hollywood perspective. Is there a movement from the pro-life side to reassert the value of life and reestablish dignity and strong moral values in that kind of Hollywood context? Well, in any context, really.
Yeah. Well, I think we certainly strive to in the Hollywood context, and you've seen, I think, in the past 15 years, you've seen pro-life films get a little further, and become a little more successful maybe than they have in the past. It's funny, you still see in the media, you see pro-life themes, though people don't want to call them pro-life themes. But you see those in regular movies, and of course, now I'm putting myself on the spot to even question what that is, but what those are. But what always amazes me is all the TV commercials you see where people, where you see an ultrasound image or something like that. So the truth is there. The truth is pervasive. It still takes a person's decision to accept the truth and to allow it to saturate all the portions of their life. But I think that the pro-life cause is certainly striving to do that, even in places like Hollywood. I know so often it's been difficult for those people to do those things, like celebrities, quote unquote, and still remain in the limelight. I mean, even if you think of something so like the Sound of Freedom movie, I know that I'm switching to human trafficking, but I kind of think, well, doesn't everybody agree that human trafficking is wrong? I mean, pro-life, pro-choice, Democrats, Republicans, but all the controversy and the kind of there was this push against that. So it's like, even if a movie about human trafficking gets pushed back, then God, you can't even imagine there. So no, I think the pro-life movement is striving. I think we have to make sure that in our homes and our churches and in our Christian schools, that we are confident in sharing the pro-life message in a compelling and compassionate manner. Because if we're not going to start there, if we're not doing it there,
Yeah,
you know,
foundational.
then how can you expect Hollywood to do it if we're not doing it in Christian homes and Christian schools, Christian churches, things like that. For example, Catholic universities often are kind of criticized, for being liberal. And even though many of those people that are in the administration of some of those places, if you pressed them, they would say they're pro-life against abortion, but they have a great opportunity to really speak truth to power, which is the people paying to go to school there are kind of the power brokers in those situations, and you have a chance to really communicate the pro-life message to people and to evangelize the pro-life message, which Christians need to rethink that, our evangelism promoting the pro-life cause and the truth of life is part of that.
Yeah, and they're not doing nearly enough even on the college campuses. I think even many of the Catholic universities are not nearly vocal enough and don't evangelize, as you said, nearly enough to the students who come in about the importance of protecting the unborn. And that, a lot of conservative Catholics are critical of their own universities because of that.
Yeah. And the issue of life also has some tangential aspects to it. I've seen certainly a number of my friends have had trouble conceiving, and they are they happen to be very pro-life people. Some of them, others maybe less so. But this kind of brings to mind the idea of in vitro fertilization, IVF. And for many couples and many families, it's been a real answer to prayer. It's brought the miracle of life to them. It's allowed them to grow their family. But at the same time, we know that there are hundreds of thousands of unimplanted embryos sitting in freezers across the country and across the world. This is a super thorny issue. It's a very emotional issue. It's a very personal issue. But what's your perspective on that at Louisiana Right to Life? I guess you touched on that with the implantation piece earlier, but what's the answer to this? What's the ethical thing to do?
Sure. Well, good question. First, I think it's important that people realize that, every person created through IVF is a person that should be protected, right? I mean, the child created through IVF is a valuable human person. And it obviously is a touchy issue, thorny, like you said, because we don't want people to think that their children who are created through IVF are somehow less of a human person because of that. They're not in any way.
Still
For
a huge
Louisiana,
miracle. It's still a
that's right.
huge miracle.
That's right. I think for Louisiana Right to Life, our concern is the what we would feel is somewhat of the commodification of human life in the process of IVF, and it's not really about the couple that's choosing IVF. It's more about the way the IVF industry runs the process, which some of the couples may not even fully appreciate what's happening because they're not thinking about it in that way. They're in a, maybe even you could say, a moment of crisis where they're seeking to have a child in that situation. So in as people may not know that in IVF they're gonna generally take a lot of ovums, eggs, female eggs, and they're gonna implant those they're going to not implant those. They're going to
Fertilize.
fertilize. Thank you, goodness. Fertilize numerous, maybe 10, maybe 20 uh, embryos at one time. Then they're going to take those. So for one woman, they have 10 or 20 fertilized embryos that they're going to keep on standby. I guess maybe we're going to call that. And then different practitioners, IVF practitioners, are then going to do things differently when it comes to implantation. Some may implant 3 at a time, 5 at a time, some maybe 1 or 2, but there's only about a 27% implantation success rate when it comes to the IVF implantation process. So the IVF practitioner, the IVF industry is making a economical decision that they're saying, look, it's about a 1 in 4 chance that these are going to take. So we're going to take a lot of embryo. We're going to make a lot of embryos so that we know we have enough to keep going. And if we need to do multiple rounds of implantation to achieve success, of course, when that embryo implants, well, that's great that occurred. But what happened is you had human human beings at the embryonic stage who died in the implantation process because they didn't take, or now once success has happened, you have all of these frozen embryos that are on standby for years, maybe decades, while maybe the family plans to try to do another round of IVF at a later
And
time.
maybe not.
And maybe not, or maybe they'd like to, but really they realize later that it was a really hard task because there's a lot of burden on the woman to undergo all the hormones and everything that has to happen. So, here's what we want to happen. We would like there to be laws that are passed that require that the number of embryos fertilized have to equate to the number that are being implanted at one given time. And the number that are being implanted at one given time are the number that want to be taken to birth if implanted. Because if someone implants four, tries to implant four and three take, let's say they beat the odds. Well, unfortunately, there's something horrific called selective abortion, which is just terrible, which goes in and will abort one or two of the children to leave the other one there.
Because because the parents only wanted the two.
They only
Or
wanted
one.
the two, or maybe because the doctor is telling them that the one or the two has a greater chance of survival if you remove the third or the fourth, whatever it might be in that situation. So it can go both ways. It can be, I mean, obviously, you're talking about couples who've invested tons and tons and tons of money, and they're going to, again, once you're in for a dime, you're in for a dollar in a sense in IVF. So we believe there need to be what we believe are common sense limitations on the IVF industry that would be more ethical. Certainly, the Catholic Church feels that there are greater kind of moral reasons to be opposed to IVF in general. And we respect that. Our position as Louisiana Right to Life is focused more on the way in which embryos are treated. And we think that there needs to be agreements about how this is done in an ethical manner. I tell you what, about 10 years ago, the state of Georgia, there was a piece of legislation in the Georgia Capitol that would do something similar to what I'm talking about. And the IVF industry descended on the Capitol there, spent tons and tons of money, and basically scared legislators into thinking that they were going to shut the IVF industry down. Now, that bill certainly would have hurt the IVF industry's bottom line. It probably would make IVF more expensive than it already is, if you can believe that. But don't we owe human lives? Don't we owe them that? I mean, these are human embryos. How at one moment can we be so focused on getting these embryos to implant and live and be born, yet at the other moment we're almost so callous in that pursuit of what we're trying to do. And it's a sad way that money has dominated the IVF. Really, what we think are the ethical requirements that should be there, that people just really don't want to talk about. It's a hard situation.
It is, and it's just so profound the way you put that, Ben. It's though, you know, depending upon the circumstances, if the embryo is wanted, obviously the parents want to have a child, want to be able to have a child or two. Once they achieve their objective, it seems like the unwanted embryos are sort of treated like commodities. So the process itself has sort of, as you said, become commodified.
And even the couples, especially pro-life couples who are struggling and who go through this process, a lot of them have really thought through kind of the future implications of this for their life, for their family. And they're not always given a ton of leeway in the process, the industry process,
Or
as you
information.
might call it. Yeah. And so, maybe they don't want to screen out via genetic testing the embryos because they have a high value of life. Maybe they don't want 10 embryos extracted, or 10 eggs extracted. And I think, you have to wonder if the pricing of the IVF is done in such a way to incentivize I guess the mass extraction rather than to incentivize, I don't know, incremental success and done with a value to life rather than, like you called it, Ben. That I liked that terminology, the commoditization of this process.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and I would imagine that the IVF industry has such a system in place of how they do it that even if a couple wanted to do it in that manner, if they even knew about that, which I mean, it's going to be less than 1% who would know of this. I just think they're going to just say no, thank you, and go find someone else. That's going to be my instinct there. I'm sure that there's a that the industry is in charge because there's not a lot of people that do IVF. I mean, it's not. I'm sure it's not an easy thing. I'm sure it takes a lot of training and all that stuff. So, but I just wish the IVF industry would take a minute to ethically think about what they're doing, the results of all. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of human embryos frozen across America. And there's, if you, I don't know, I'm sorry if I'm getting aside. I'm not sure if y'all heard about the situation after Hurricane Katrina, how the boats were going to, I believe it's in Slidell. It's been a while since I read the story, but there were some of the first boats that were coming into New Orleans went to a IVF clinic, I believe in Slidell, where they were trying to rescue these embryos. And so it's kind of like it's shaking our head and thinking, guys, I mean, stop. If you're going to make that big of an effort to go save these frozen embryos, which trust me, I'm all for that they went and did that, right? But can't we step back here a second and say, is there something wrong with this picture?
With
If
the
we're like,
process.
yeah, I mean, can't we like go back and say, well, maybe we shouldn't be freezing this many of these? It just seems like you'd have to wouldn't your conscience prick yourself at some point and just make you question that? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It would. And Ben, you've been so gracious with your time today, and we covered a lot of ground. But what would you say to our listeners who are passionate about the issue of life? What should they be doing? You know, we can't rest on our laurels. We know that even though abortion in some ways, in most ways, is outlawed in Louisiana, but the battle, as you said, is not over. What would you charge them to do?
Yeah, I guess I would focus on kind of three things. First is we have to be together as a movement, ensuring that we are all doing our part to serve women and children and families in our community. So wherever you are, you need to ask yourself, okay, am I involved with the local pregnancy center in my community? Am I supporting them? Does my church or my school or community, whatever I'm attached to, do we have some outreach to pregnant moms or even supporting ministries that are doing that? So just some basic things that you could be doing. You don't have to go work in a maternity home all day every day with your time or something like that, but everyone needs to be pitching in because it's a big job. So that's number one. Number two, I mean, we got to be pro-life evangelizers in our daily life. And if the other side is not, they're not resting, they're not stopping, they're not going to stop until every state legalizes abortion, and in all stages and all months of pregnancy. So we have to make sure that we're evangelizing from a pro-life perspective, our young people, even for colleagues, social media as well. Don't be afraid of the bullies, but be confident in your stance. So that's number two. Number three is I believe right now legislators hear more from people who don't like the way the law is instead of those people who like the law. It's just natural. We go to our elected officials when we're not happy.
Right.
Yeah.
How often do we go and say, "Hey, I like what you did. Good
Yeah,
job."
great job.
Right. And probably almost never, most of us. So I still think legislators need to hear that they are appreciated for their pro-life positions. And if people are not pro-life, they're hearing from their legislators. When legislators make really hard votes, like Chris, you were talking earlier about those votes last year at the Capitol. Some state legislators, they were really torn up about this because they had people in their community who were saying, hey, we need abortion in case of rape and incest. Please do this. And they were getting pulled by even members of their own family. And pro-life people, especially when legislators make hard votes, You need to go to them. You need to thank them, go by their office, visit them, write a note, drop it off at their office, give them balloon. Well, maybe not give them balloons. I don't know if that's against the ethics rules, but I don't know. Just show your appreciation in some way, because these legislators sometimes get into the silo of thinking that everyone's against them on abortion issues because the people contacting them don't support our position. So those are kind of the three things I would
Yeah,
say.
positive affirmation, Ben, is so very important, that these legislators hear good things from their constituents and are recognized when they show courage and do the right thing. That is just so very important. Before I close you out by asking you how people can reach out to you and get involved with Louisiana Right to Life, I want to make one final point here, and this is just drawing kind of broadly on our whole conversation here today. I remember when my mom, when we were growing up in Shreveport, and my mom, whom you know and met, was working with young pregnant women when she founded the Pregnancy Referral Center in Shreveport, and she would be working with these women, these oftentimes 16, 18, 19 years old, who were pregnant. And she used to tell me that the reason why they make the decision to have an abortion is not because they want to. It's not because they are excited about it. It's because they are deeply afraid and they feel deeply vulnerable and they don't know what else to do. And she said, the moment you put your arms around them and you let them know that you have support and you have love and your life is not over because of this and you don't have to make this decision and we are here to help you. She said that 99% of the time they carried the child to term and they were always thankful that they had done so. And so I think that the core of all of this, Ben, and you alluded to it earlier, is love and compassion and support. Because to me, there's nothing that's more fundamentally unnatural than for a woman to allow her unborn child, her own flesh and blood, to be destroyed. It's not something that comes natural. And so in order to make sure that they don't make that decision, the compassion, the love, and the support system is so very, very important. And your group has done so much along those lines and has made such a great contribution to preserve the culture of life in Louisiana. So I want to ask you, how can people get in touch with Louisiana Right to Life, and maybe even what are some events that are coming up that folks can go to and get to know you better?
Sure. So so our website is prolifelouisiana.org, all spelled out. You can probably just Google Louisiana Right to Life, it's probably easier. All social medias, you can, connect with us. Just search Louisiana Right to Life, follow us, whatever you like to do in that space. So definitely, please connect with us. We send out regular emails and things like that where you can see the things that we're doing. We have offices in New Orleans, Lafayette, and then kind of some team members across the state we can connect you with. So feel free to give us a call. Find all that on our website. Events that are upcoming are, January, interestingly, for so long we marked it as the anniversary of Roe v. Wade that it still just kind of has this importance on the pro-life calendar because we had all of our events then. So it's still the case. We haven't really changed that. So we have our main fundraiser for the year in New Orleans, January 13th, our Proudly Pro-Life Gala. Our speaker is Jim Caviezel, Sound of Freedom, mentioned earlier. So not intentionally mentioned it that early, but it's going to be a great event. People can go to prolifegala.com to get tickets. So we hope you can join us for that. Then we have our 5 state life marches coming up in January. You can visit our website, lalifemarch.com. You see the dates of all those life march events across the state in Baton Rouge, Shreveport, Monroe, Alexandria, and Lake Charles. Maybe I mixed some of those up. And then we're co-sponsoring an event in Lafayette with the Catholic Diocese there as well. So January is a great time to show your pro-life support. We need to shine that light to our nation and our state that we still believe and know that these are core pro-life principles we need to advance. So those are my immediate thoughts on how people can connect.
Well, you've done a great job, and know that you will continue to do a great job going forward. And we just look forward to partnering with you to make sure that our laws in Louisiana remain strong, and that we also reach out with real compassion, real love, real support for women who find themselves in difficult situations. If we do both of those two things, we're going to win on the issue and continue to win. So God bless you.
Amen to that.
God bless you, Ben, for coming on today, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you all for being pro-life and tackling this issue, which I'm sure some people don't like out there. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yep, it's important to us. Thank you, Ben. Chris, we covered so much ground in this conversation, but we were just both so interested in understanding what the state of things is in Louisiana, what we can do as individual citizens, as individual voices to advance the cause of life, even though we've taken so much ground. I think Ben put it in very stark terms for us that there's still a lot of ground left to take, and much of it is cultural.
Yes, it is. And, paraphrase, I think St. Paul, or maybe even Jesus, said that we must remain alert, sober, and vigilant. And I think that we're going to continue to make good progress on this issue. And so much of it, as Ben said, Danielle, is to reach out in our own communities and sort of to help recreate the culture of life through education and evangelization. That's what it's going to come down to, apart from the law.
Apart from the law. And another piece of this, Chris, is just that courage is contagious. I know we say that from time to time on this show, but people, especially in bigger cities, have a hard time being vocal about their stance on any number of issues, any number of moral issues, because the voices are so loud against what is right. What is it, against what is the word of God. And I think if I could just encourage our listeners, it's to be bold and be bold about your stance for life. I know Louisiana in large part is very pro-life, and I'm so grateful for that. But it is a time to be bold because courage is contagious. And when people see you stand up and say, actually, that is a baby in that mommy's belly. It's a baby. It's not a turtle. It's not a frog. It's not going to be a surprise. It's a baby. When people have the boldness to say that, it will embolden others, and it'll give others the courage and the backup to feel like, okay, yeah, I can say what I think too. I can actually stand up for what's right.
Yes, it's empowering, and courage resonates. There's no question courage resonates, and a person is much more inclined to stand up and express how they really feel if they know they're not the only one, and that there are other people who are supporting them and behind them. But you have to have a few at the beginning with courage to stand up, and then that resonates, and it has a domino effect across the state. And I think that's what's going to happen. I'm so excited to continue working. I'm very proud to be pro-life and to lend a voice to the vulnerable unborn. As Ben said, Danielle, there are the relatively strong and the relatively weak in our society, but the unborn are not relatively weak. They are absolutely weak. They are absolutely defenseless and absolutely voiceless. And if a civilized, decent society cannot stand up and lend a voice to protect the unborn, then as far as I'm concerned, we're not a civilized society at all.
Yeah. Yeah, so well said. And we will continue to stand for the cause of life, which we're both so proud to do, as our families are, and we know so many of our listeners are. And if we can be an encouragement to you, just reach out. Just reach out to us. We'd be happy to be an encouragement to you on this issue as well. Well, Chris, if people want to support the State of Freedom and support getting great interviews like this one on air, they can do that at freedomstate.us. We would certainly welcome it. We want to continue to be able to bring to you in a sustainable way voices like Ben Clapper and so many others that we have brought on that have shed light and brought to life some very important critical issues that we're facing as a state and as a nation and really as individuals. So if you're interested in supporting us, you can do that at freedomstate.us or through a check to P.O. Box 861, Berg, Louisiana, 70343. And don't forget that LACAG is working really hard on these pro-life issues at the legislature and working to get pro-life legislators elected. And so please don't forget to support LACAG as well. And you can do that at lacag.org. And the P.O. Box, I still don't have it memorized, Chris.
That's quite all right. P.O. Box 64952, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 70896. We welcome your donations, your memberships, and your support, and we rely on them to continue growing and to continue expanding. You know, you said something a little while ago, Danielle, and I don't remember what it was, but it sort of jogged me. You know, there's a part in the scripture that says that, you know, my people perish for a lack of knowledge. And we exist in order, on the State of Freedom, we exist in order to be a portal for knowledge for people, understanding, information, so that they can act in an educated and intelligent way on these issues that matter so much, so that we don't perish for a lack of knowledge. We want to have information because knowledge really is power. And in order to continue to build our infrastructure, to build our voice across Louisiana, we first of all thank our supporters and our donors, and we ask for your continued support.
Yeah, and that's so well said, Chris. We know that our listeners are ones who are pursuing knowledge and pursuing truth. These are not people who are sticking their head in the sand like an ostrich, and when they face the Lord, say, you know, I couldn't handle the truth. I couldn't just take a look at the truth. So I'm so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for our listeners who are alongside the fight for truth and for righteousness, right alongside us.
Absolutely.
Couldn't be prouder. And before we leave, Chris, I'll just mention that we do have an opportunity for any listeners who may be interested in investing in precious metals or starting even a home-based business in the precious metals industry. Metal Stacks, as you may have heard before, is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, which is actual dealer cost. They are beating the big sites. They have no credit card fees and no minimums. So if you're just interested in purchasing metals, you can visit metalstacks.com/DWalker and get to shopping. That helps me out. I get the commission, and you can also refer people to Metal Stacks for an additional income. So if you're interested in learning about the referral business aspect, email me directly at Danielle@freedomstate.us.
As you know, Danielle, Katie and I just signed up to Metal Stack.
Yes,
And we're
I'm so excited.
Oh, and just thrilled to do it, thrilled for the opportunity, and so thankful to have it. Well, we each day on the State of Freedom through LACAG are going to continue to move forward with God's grace, with courage. We will continue to broaden the knowledge base of citizens across Louisiana, and each day take another step to preserve the State of Freedom, the great state of Louisiana.
Yes, we are. Thank you, Chris. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Thanks for listening to the State of Freedom. To stay on top of all the calls to action we mentioned today, just check out the show notes for the episode. If you'd like to support the show financially, visit our website at freedomstate.us. If you'd prefer to give by mail, you can send a check to the State of Freedom, LLC at P.O. Box 861, Berg, Louisiana, 70343. If you own a business in Louisiana and are interested in supporting our show by advertising, please email us at info@freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org, LACAG.org, or email Chris at chris@lacag.org. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe and share it. Give us a 5-star rating in the reviews. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.